Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a very special video as I'm joined by rhythm vocalist Loire Cotler for a very special interview talking Dune, X-Men, Hans Zimmer live, and a lot more as we preview Dune Part 2, which is out in cinemas next Friday, the 1st of March. But before we start talking about anything else, Loire, thank you so much for joining me today, joining me online across the other part of the world. How are we doing?
Hi, George. Thank you. Thank you for thinking about this idea of someone like me being on your show, and it's a privilege to be here and meet you, and I'm doing great.
Thank you so much. It's a real honour for me as well. This channel's been building up to the release of Dune Part 2. We've done a few videos already. Part 1's a favourite of ours when it released a couple of years ago. There was a lot of videos on it. In that time, I've read the first 2 books, listened to the varying soundtracks a lot, which we'll be talking about as well. And have been even lucky to see some of the music live, listen to some of the music live, of course, yourself performing on the tours as well. But where we sort of kickstart this today, I do want to get people at home involved. So I do want to hear from people. Comment your thoughts on not just Dune Part 2, that it wouldn't have been out by the time, but what you're looking forward to, your favourite maybe songs from the first soundtrack, your thoughts on the X-Men Dark Phoenix soundtrack as well, because I'm going to be talking about that a lot today. I've spoken about that soundtrack a lot on this channel, and I'm really, really excited to talk to you about that because, as a preview for later, it's one of the most incredible things to hear live was X-Men, and it wasn't expected, if I'm being honest, on a set list, which is a story probably in itself. But as always, for people at home, if you want to find us on social media, what are the videos we're working on, you can get us on linktree.com/cinemasavvy, and that'll put you through to our Facebook, Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram pages. But I mentioned we are here talking Dune and a few of the films, but before we get to any of the films, I'd love to ask, what is it to be a rhythm vocalist? For myself that wasn't familiar with the term before, and maybe other people watching at home that might know you from the films you've worked on, I'd love to hear a little bit about that and your early work leading up to first working in the film industry.
Oh, that's a great question. I appreciate it so much. Because I guess that's true. What is a rhythm vocalist? And it's something that I continue to explore and define for myself as well. But at some point, very, very long ago, when I was a child, I realized that my attraction for rhythm and for connecting with rhythm and pulse was just galvanized me in from a very young age. And even though I ultimately went on the path of becoming or having my vehicle for expression be the voice, my approach to all the music that I do and singing is through rhythm. And so in the early days, that might have been through scat singing in the jazz tradition, just on a technical level. And then later on, when I heard the vocal percussion from India, that just became an extension of what is possible, what are the extremes that you can delve into with the human voice. So the rhythmic power of the voice is something that has attracted me and has motivated my expressions for a very long time. And well, if we want to go even deeper, it's the heartbeat, really, because the source rhythm for me has always been connecting with the heartbeat, because that is like when I connect with that, it's the artery for creativity and creation. And so that's really my start point with anything that I do in the music collaborations or in my music activities.
Amazing. And for myself, that although I listen to a lot of soundtracks, music hasn't always been my forte, so a lot of these terms have been new to me, especially doing some research toward this as well. Having seen some of your interviews in the past, we'll be talking about some of that. But where I kind of want to jump in with really, X-Men Dark Phoenix, I believe, is the first film you worked on. I would love to know. I mean, for me at least, I don't mind saying this. I'm from the same town as Sophie Turner. She went to a drama school around the corner from where I grew up, where my friends used to go. We're in the same year group, so it's always been one of them, like, you root for an actor or an actress that's local to you. She is the Dark Phoenix in the film. Yourself is almost the voice of the Dark Phoenix, like how you described as the voice of Dune. How did that come to be? I would love to know this, because the soundtrack to Dark Phoenix, I think, is incredible, and it's so different to the rest of the X-Men scores. Hans Zimmer comes in and makes it his own, but it's your voice, I think, segregates it from anything we'd heard in those films before.
Well, let me first express that the way that it happened is there's it's almost like there's two scores because there's the score you hear to picture, and then there's another score in a way that, and they do overlap, but when we got started. From the very beginning, it was Hans's. I mean, are we surprised that he has this, this otherworldly vision and concept and idea and vibrational sensitivity to this character, and to the, ultimately to how he found me, really, which was, what if her inner world, what was going on in her inner world, was represented through something with the rhythmic powers of the voice. And then he started searching around, and he and the legendary, amazing Edie Lehman Bodecker and Michael Lehman Bodecker and Hans, they found me on YouTube, and then sent me a message through my website. And next thing I know, a few weeks later, I won't go into all the details now, but I'm walking into Hans's studio, and we're having dinner and chatting about all of this. And no, but getting back to it, so he has this vision about it, and when we did sit down and he told me about it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. And I had immediately imagined the whispering of the vocal percussion that I do, which is coming from South India, the Konakal, which I specialize in, but not doing it in a way that's traditional, but moving it into a non-traditional arena. And he, I almost feel like he imagined all of that. And then he was guiding me into discovering how to push my voice to those, to the edge and to those limits, to those outer limits, I should say. So there's the vocal percussion aspect, which was his original vision, and we really, really deep dive into that. And you can hear quite a bit more of that in Experiments, the album. But in the movie, it's in there in a much more subliminal way, but the movie had changed directions midway through production. That's a whole story that I, wouldn't even dare touch or get into. It's not my, role, but things changed. And so there was this, this shift in the way that the scoring went. And so a lot of the material that we had been developing using the rhythmic side of the voice isn't in the movie. But instead you hear the wonderful Suzanne Waters singing the soprano line. And you heard that in our show, I believe, correct? You heard Molly Rogers sing it, the
Yeah.
magnificent Molly, and both beautiful, amazing, just channels, light channels of sound and music, and so they that line is not me singing it, that more traditional soprano, but in the score you do hear, some of the,
Yeah, that's it.
you hear all that variations of that, and not so traditional because I can't layer up the way that I did, here, but there's a lot of layers of different ways that I create those types of choirs where I'll change the syllable shapes so that they're become more subliminal. You can't really grab onto it, but you feel something. It makes you feel.
Amazing. I'm glad you brought up experimental because I believe that was originally going to be a second disc on a CD, and I believe the CD was cancelled. But I guess with Hans being Hans, I believe also there was a fan petition online too. It was able to get released digitally
Oh,
later in
yeah.
the year. I feel it might even be out in vinyl now, so it is available to listen to. But experimental is really interesting because again, with Dark Phoenix, I know we can't talk about what would have happened behind the scenes, but the fact we were able to get essentially 2 soundtracks come out for the film, and I've got to say, for anyone listening at home that hasn't listened to Experimental, not only has it got the perfect title being X-Men and called Experimental, but certainly the first one I think is about 18 minutes long, and I believe that's predominantly your voice in that too, which it sounds unbelievable, and it's really interesting to see, as you mentioned, how it differs once you get into the final version of the film, but having the experimental score is like the perfect, I think, complement to it, that you get to see the evolution of the soundtrack before it makes its way to the big screen. And kind of with also talking experimental, so how was it, I guess, seeing the film, but the first time you maybe go to watch a film that you're involved in, how did that feel compared to a normal cinema trip, perhaps?
Oh, it's exciting, and it's suddenly, because I can, for me, and for, I'm sure, most of the creative team, we're so immersed in the process, and the process is probably the most exhilarating and meaningful part of all of this. So when you're on this side of the screen, meaning like that's, it's kind of, when you see it, it is surreal in a way, but the journey to get to that point has so much meaning, and to me the essence really is of the height of my emotions happen on that, during that process, and then being a passive or an active participant as an audience member is just, I just feel like everybody else. I feel completely like a blank slate again, and almost removed from being part of it, because I want to try to experience what everyone, to be part of that wave, as an audience member, because then, I don't want to ever go back into something. I only want to be in the moment. So I don't think too hard about, oh God, why didn't I do that? Or why, I know that can come up sometimes, and, we compare our, our performances or something, but I just want to be part of the, the joy and the wonder of it all.
Absolutely.
And as a fan, I'm a fan everybody that I work with, like in a big way. I mean, I am so enamored with. There's no words really to describe how I feel about Hans, and so because I'm a fan of him, or Denis, or all the soloists and musicians that I'm working with the band. I mean, I truly feel so much like the deepest love and respect for everybody, that to me it's also just a celebration of them, and I'm just sort of riding the wave. I'm like, how did I get here?
Of course, that's amazing. And kind of with that too, you mentioned Hans. You worked with James Newton Howard, who of course worked with Hans Zimmer many times, especially on the earlier Batman films. But Raya and the Last Dragon is also something you worked on. How was the experience going from one sort of legendary composer to another? Because that must be sort of back to back quite something too.
Yeah, it's like you when you're in a creative space, you have portals. It's a, I well, I mean, our creative consciousness, if that makes sense, is boundless, right? And so in a way, I'm having to enter into different portals or dimensions depending on what's happening. And if more than one thing is happening at a time, it comes in handy to be able to do that, to be able to go into that space through, my meditation and, whatever my process is to get there. But yeah, I do it, and then I can be completely present with these completely different scenarios. And of course, I wouldn't have worked with James if it wasn't for Hans, because Hans introduced me to James. They were talking about, James was speaking, legend has it, James was speaking with Hans about this movie that he was working on, which happened to have been Raya. And he was looking for someone that could, bring to life Raya and the power of this character and this and that. And he apparently just started to play him some of the stuff we had been working on, like in that moment, like we were going back and forth, I think on that day even, or even in that whole period of time. And then James just said, like, how do I, like, yes, I want to, can you connect me? And that the rest is history. But yeah, I mean, the difference, there's no, when you work with great composer, for me, my position is to just, be a vessel and remove any pre-existing attitudes or ideas about anything, and just to be as blank as I can and receive all the direction and listen, not just with my ears, but listen with every aspect of my awareness, right? So you're almost allowing yourself to receive energy and frequencies and vibrations through their genius, really, because they have an idea already about what's happening musically and how that fits with the character and with the picture and all that. And I couldn't possibly know what that is until I just, allow myself to, to open those portals. It's hard to describe. I'm sorry, I'm a bit rambling here, but yeah.
No, that's okay. And kind of sticking with it, without putting you on the spot too much before we talk to Dune, I'd love to ask, is there a composer, I know there's probably so many, but is there any composer in the world that jumps to mind that if the knock at the door came to work on a film of theirs, do you know who that would be? You drop everything for on the spot.
No, I mean, it's happening. I mean, Hans, it's like um, I'll never say no to, to a knock on the door from Hans. It's like, you know, I don't work, I don't live that way or exist that way. I don't, I'm not a goal oriented person. And, I really, I've never been, and that's, maybe has worked for me. And I just, I just keep seeing what can I do with this instrument? What can I do with this vehicle that I have for expression? And that's kind of the way that I've always approached life, and to just, yeah.
Amazing. And talking Dune as well. Let's. I mean, one of the biggest, I think, not just one of the biggest films of all time, one of the most challenging films any director could ever take on, Denis Villeneuve, like Lord of the Rings, in that category of no one can ever turn this into a film. I've not seen the 1984 version yet. I will once I've seen Dune Part 2. Without plugging it on the channel, the review will be up by the time this video goes up, a spoiler-free one I'm going to add for those that haven't read the book. Essentially, you've been marketed as the voice of Dune at the live concerts or on the press tours, everything. The film almost opens with your voice, the incredible voice, I'm going to say too. Can you talk us through how that came to be? I mean, of course, you worked on X-Men, but you're allowed to elaborate on Hans being involved, because I believe he was attached to Dune before X-Men. Going back to, I think, Blade Runner, when Denis was working with him on there were murmurs. So I'd love to know a little bit about that, if you can shed some light on it.
Yeah, I mean, I very specifically, Hans called me on New Year's Day of 20. I don't remember. I think it was 2020. That was pandemic year, right? It was either 2020 or 2021, but I think it was 20. Whatever. It was New Year's Day of one of those years, and he just immediately, started talking about this project that was happening, was about to get going, and they hadn't really had the meetings yet with the team, and he started telling me about Dune, and I immediately felt. Again, this listening beyond the words was happening immediately. I was, even on that phone call, or FaceTime or whatever it was, I was immediately traveling into the world of Dune and into the wisdom and the power of the Bene Gesserit and whatever. I didn't even have, there was no music yet or anything, but Hans has this just amazing ability to lead you into these realms, and even before we had the music, I was already being guided somehow, and yeah, the process was very early on. Of my involvement was very early on, because it was right before the pandemic, so it must have been 20. And I went to the studio, and there were, he started to put together a team of just, Hans knows how to put in alignment the most magnificent artists and creatives and tech team. And it's such a privilege to just be in their presence, let alone collaborate, because he just, who he is as a human being, just just reflects and is like a magnet to finding just beautiful, exquisite humans and artists. And so, and I felt that right away. And actually, that first meeting, I didn't know that Denis was going to be there.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, so I just gotten off the plane or something, and and Edie was there, Edie Lehman Bodiker, and who I mentioned earlier, um, and so I just remember walking in, and big hugs, and and then Hans said, um, Loire, this is our director. And I was like, oh my God, so nice to meet you. And hugs, hugs, hugs. That was so, yeah. I just, the vibratory force that was happening in Creativesville was just next level and off the charts. And I felt it. It was like an out of body experience. But then when we got deeper into the creative bits, of Hans giving music for me to check out, and that, I just remember like having this feeling like when the lyrical themes that of Hans's music, it's like they ask these universal questions of things. It could be anything like loss or love or battle, or maybe it's something peculiar of an unknown origin, for example. And I just always, for me, I just go into this idea that the wordless rhythms from my heart will seek out the answers. And I think that's where the collaboration part, is just so rich, because he's already there. I feel like Hans is already like everywhere, cosmically, but we're the instruments. His soloists are the instruments that have to deliver or translate all of this stuff. And then sure, you could say that it's an original sound because of this musician or that musician or that, but we're an extension of him and his unbelievable, indescribable tasks that he gives us, where, yeah, well, I think that there is only one way to do it, and that's just to is to delve into that space, that vast, infinite, boundless space of creativity and adventure, as he puts it, and play, of course, because we have a great time too.
Yeah, and kind of with that, jumping ahead, I remember this, not only am I excited for the film, my favorite composers attached to it. A big thing at the time was, oh, Hans isn't doing the new Nolan film. He's picked Dune over Nolan, which was a massive thing too. And I remember the first announcement for the soundtracks, that there wasn't just going to be one soundtrack. There wasn't going to be a second soundtrack during the sketchbook. There were three in total. One for the art and soul of Dune, which is an incredible behind the scenes book for anybody who hasn't had the chance to read it yet. How similar was that to Experimental, that you can see the evolution of the music in each differing score, but the fact three were made and you're featured in all of them too? Are you able to elaborate a little bit on that too?
Well, we never stop. I mean, I actually feel like it's still happening. We never, he just kept going, and the inspiration was so, it was so deep and personal. And of course, everybody's heard the story about he and Denis, and this being a childhood dream. And gosh, it was so moving being in that room that day, because to hear the two of them talking about that, and right in this close proximity, I'm getting teary eyed even just thinking about it now, because it had that very personal touch, and so being in that space, never, it's like we remained in that space through the whole thing, and it's still happening, right? That very beautiful, these two young boys in a way, talking about Dune and the impact it had, and just starting from there, and that start point already puts you in exactly where you need to be, you know, to align all of our passion for what we do and all of our inspiration for creating something that never existed before. The alignment was powerful, and it still is. And so when the film was done and we kept getting, tracks, like I'd wake up to, I'm like, wow, what's this, and there'd be just this like abundance of material that he wanted me to work on. And I remember one track in particular that is so special. They're all so special. I mean, I don't know where to begin, but where should I begin? There's no beginning. but I was just thinking about my work with David Fleming, with Dave on Song of the Sisters. So that's a big track. That's a long one.
Yeah.
And when Hans and Dave sent me the first round of tracks to work with, I was like, whoa, wow. I mean, this is heavy. And I just felt like, yeah, this is, I mean, all the music, but there was something about that one in particular that took on a life. Like it was a lot of material and a lot of multi-tracking. All of the choir all the chanting that you hear. I'm not sure how many tracks I did, but it was a lot of going into the characters in a very personal way, and the mystical side of things that were going on with the Bene Gesserits, and the kind of, creating different voices for each track so that it would sound even more mysterious and haunting. And yeah, anyway, I that was one that came early on, after the movie was done. And then you can imagine, the time of, yeah.
Amazing, especially the Bene Gesserit stuff that I think so many people think about the opening and Paul's dream with your work on that, is that I think it could be easy for someone to forget that you're a constant on the entirety of that soundtrack too. And kind of where I'm going with this too is, we mentioned COVID earlier. Is it my understanding that the entirety of that first score was done remotely?
Yeah.
I'd love, and that's remarkable, that the fact that was able to be done to make one of the best scores of the last sort of couple of decades in sci-fi, if I'm being really honest with you. How was that to approach to record too? That must have been incredibly difficult at the same time.
It was, and also it allowed for a different kind of journeying, I think. I mean, for the way that I work anyway, creatively, from the creative side, I clear out so that I can move into these other worlds, and receiving information from Hans, whether it's right here in person or through FaceTime or on a telephone or a text message or something like that. I mean, his guidance and transmission of what he is imagining, or maybe he's not even sure, maybe it's not even clear what it is, but we feel that he already knows. He just not, like, it's through some kind of beyond words transmission, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel as challenging for my role to have worked remotely. In fact, I feel sometimes I even feel, just on a personal note, I feel more like I can thrive in a smaller space when I go into these meditations. I don't really need big spaces or lots of, things to get me there. I mean, just Hans is, and of course, when he would send tracks to me, and maybe they already had been tracked up by someone like Pedro Eustache, and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, and like in Paul's Dream, I remember getting the first iteration of the melody of the tune, and maybe that wasn't the first moment, but I remember getting it when it was already tracked up a bit, with Pedro, and I was so moved, of how he brought it to life, and then from there I could start channeling the language shapes and the chant that you might hear under, weaving in and out of that. And I don't even mean the chant, the
Yeah.
call. I don't mean that one. There's others, and but to have someone like Pedro suddenly in your ears, or Guthrie, or Tina, and you just sort of we feed off of each other, because again, the kind of love and admiration, and that we have, and we're all kind of just like riding this wave, and the, consciousness is boundless, right? I believe that. So whether we're in the room together or working remotely, we're always doing that anyway. I think we're transporting all the time. But yeah, but he's such a visionary in the way that he transfers imagery, Hans. James was too. Getting back to Raya, that a great film composer can do that. They know how to do that, and so working as a receiver and a vessel, to translate some of that, they very different approaches, of course, very different. They're, two different ways. But with Hans, how can I explain it? It's like he can give a clear notion of mood and sonic emotional landscape, and in a way that doesn't even make sense. And he could tell me a whole soliloquy about what this is about, and then and also some of the material might be very dark and scary, so I'm going to have to go into this like an actor, go into this very deep place, and then I'm just listening, taking it in, and then maybe it's time where I could feel that he's gonna say goodbye. Okay, go and do it. See what you come up with, kind of thing, and then just as he's about to like hang up the phone or turn off, click end on the FaceTime, he might say something like, oh, and by the way, just swallow sand. You got it. I'm going to go swallow sand now.
That's amazing. And you can kind of imagine it when you see him in his interviews, sort of talking about his creative processes. There's very few like it, especially for something like Dune. And I know he spoke about prior inspirations that he wanted to be like nothing he'd scored in his career. I think for him to bring in loads of his other collaborators, and you've mentioned some of the other amazing performers, and I guess we can sort of talk a little bit about Hans Zimmer live too. You've been present on the last few tours. I believe it was 2022. The first one you might have been on was the European tour. How has that experience been? Especially, if I'm allowed to say, you open the show with a House of Atreides too. How is that? Going from I'm at home, I'm doing this in my own space. The score is going to go on to have this incredible film, but then suddenly I'm doing it in front of thousands of people, sold out arenas around Europe. Can you talk about how that happened and how that felt in comparison to recording it?
Well, I mean, it's such an honor to share the stage with the band. I mean, I can't. I would just spend the whole, you know, hour here talking about each and every one and how much I love them. And we really are a family, a tour family. It's a spiritual family. Um, you know, there is. I even came up with a term. I think the last tour, a tour lepathy, that we start to just, you know, get in such, we're just really riding the same wave, and the frequencies are profoundly synchronized, and rhythmically too. But so, you know, the other thing about being, I've been, just to backtrack, I mean, I've been a touring musician for a long time. Just it's just that I came into the film world where there's a lot more exposure, I guess you'd say, more recently. But for me, I've always been a touring musician with my other projects, and so this was just another, you know, different type of music, but to be on the stage feels very natural for me, and to jam with musicians is, it's like everything that, it's why I'm here actually. But yeah, the other thing about the band and Hans, of what he created with this is, I really feel, I mean, we haven't talked about this yet, but the healing power of music is something that drives everything, that I do. But also I feel like, when you have a group of people, again, like with this kindred spirit alignment of what Hans is able to create, these teams, or these, you know, how can I even put it into words? But the way that we come together with our collective passion and purpose and intention, um, I really do feel like there is healing being done in the world with this type of music and this type of expression. Not, you know, on the one hand, it's because of the music that is created, but it's also what you don't hear, but what you sense. And that sensory place, I think, for what I experience, is the interconnectivity of the music makers, and the intention, the deep intention, that we're sharing something. We're like, you know, it's like, come inside the temple kind of thing. We're showing you what's inside, you know, and but we're sharing it together, and encoded in music, um, is possibly the highest form of communication. And that might, you know, that's a bit out there, but I believe that we communicate, you know, in a far more advanced manner through frequencies and energy and waves. And I think about that a lot. And I, especially in my work with film composers, but especially Hans, you know, I always think about that. Gosh, what is that quote? The Tesla quote. Yeah, if you want to understand the world, like, consider it in terms of like energy and waves, or energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think Nikola Tesla knew a lot about that. I trust what he said. And when I think about that, I think about Hans. I think he operates and navigates that way. And because of that, we're led into a much higher plane of musical expression, you know.
No, absolutely. And what's quite incredible as well was that Hans won his second Oscar on the road for Dune,
Yeah.
whilst you're all on tour. There's classic photos of the dressing gown, the Oscar statue. How was that as a performer to see the work yourself and everyone around you had done on the screen and on stage being rewarded with, I guess, the most prestigious film aspect you could? Was that a surreal experience?
I was so proud of everybody and so proud of Hans, and my celebration again just felt like I just wanted to. I just like seeing his smile and feeling his energy and being right there beside him, and some of the bandmates had participated on the score in such a deep, integral way as I did, and I just felt a sense of you know pride, and to be in the space with everyone, and yeah, I just was cheering for them, and of course I feel so proud to be part of this 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 unbelievable work of art. That's the thing, is that this is a work of art on the highest level. I mean, it's poetic, and what Denis and Hans and Joe Walker and Greg Free, the whole team. I mean, I could go down, and then of course all the creative team of Hans, who, the orchestrators and additional, music, and I wouldn't know where to really start or end with that, because it really is profound. It's profound, really. So yeah, it was a beautiful moment for sure.
Amazing. And kind of following that up, something I want to talk about, one of my experiences at the concerts, I think it might have been the first one in 22 in London. Lisa Gerrard, I believe, got COVID on the day, and you had to cover the Gladiator suite, which I believe Hans actually stopped the show to then tell us after it was the first ever time you'd performed that live. How was that as an experience? Because, and I'm not saying because you're on the stream, it sounded incredible. And to step into the shoes of Lisa Gerrard on Gladiator at no notice must be, I can imagine, one of the most intense experiences on a tour. But I'd love to hear a bit from you about that, because that was remarkable finding that story out.
Well, if you see my face lighting up, it's because you mentioned Lisa, and I love her so much, and we've grown to just be very, just soul sisters, if you will, and we stay in touch, and we're really very close. And I, and got closer through that experience. Yeah, I didn't know. Well, first of all, it's not that I didn't sing it live. I never sang it before, and I didn't know it. It's one thing to hear something on a score, but it's another thing to actually have the music and know, rhythmically where you're going, and how it all, fits with the orchestra and the soloists and all that. So, but we had planned that I was going to learn this piece, right? So, because Lisa was going to be going on tour, and she wasn't going to be with us the entirety of that tour. She was leaving to go on tour with Dead Can Dance, and so I learned, I think, about a week before, I believe, or 10 days before, that that they needed someone to sing Gladiator, and they told me, and somehow, with all the chaos that we were in with Dune and everything that was going on, the memo never got out. And I was like, no. And then Lisa, we were at sound check, and in the one of the arenas, I don't remember where we were, and she, Loire, will you sing Gladiator for me? And I was like, what? I don't know it, don't worry, I'll show it to you. Okay. So I thought, okay, great. Of course she's asking me, of course, and then of course Hans said, Laura, you'll be great. You'll be fine. You know that. Okay. So now I'm like, she's like, we have plenty of time. I'm not going on tour for 10 days. So I think the following weekend we were going to be in Ireland, and we have days off in Ireland. I'm going to teach it to you there. Well, the most amazing thing happened, which was our hotel room were right next to each other. And 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 our beds were like up against the like this way, and then there was just like this wall. To this day, we just call it the wall of dreams, you know. And so my head, no, Lisa was here, and my head was there, and this is how we lived in that hotel with this wall between us, and we would get together, and we ended up just talking and hanging out for like 2 days, on and off, meals, a drink, da, da, da. And she's like, and I'm gonna make this score for you. I'm gonna write this score. You're gonna get it. It's gonna be so easy. She kept telling me it's gonna be easy, and I'm thinking, this is not an easy piece. That easy for her to say. So while we were, enjoying each other's company and getting, into our friendship mode, she's like hand like writing this amazing score for me that's very artistic. It's it's completely in her own style of notation, so it's not Western notation at all. And it's very sacred to me. It's a very beautiful treasure, and no matter what, I always bring it with me to the gig. And even at one point, I think it was like last year in Dubai, Lisa, she sent me a note. She called me. Loire, do you happen to have that score? And I said, yes. Can I borrow it? Yes. She wanted to check something. So I always bring it just in case she needs it, or just in case, you never know, right? It's like we always have to have each other's back. So anyway, I never sang it at that point. And then finally she finished writing the score, and I was like, this is amazing. And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, this makes total sense. It makes sense. Still hadn't sang it. And then Nick Lenny Smith, our remarkable, beautiful, incredible musical director, said, Loire, should we check out the score? So I showed him the score, that Lisa made, and we kind of like just looked at it, but I still hadn't like sang it with anybody. And then I might have like, sang along for a moment, like with the track or something, so that we could look at like how her chart like matched up with, like, cause I knew I was going to need the inner ear, like the click, the timing in the beginning anyway. So that was all the extent of it. And then we had a gig the next day, I guess it was. And that was that in London, I think, the first,
Yeah,
where the first one. And then I got the email from the note from Lisa. We were already in London. That's right. The next day we went to London, and Lisa wrote me a note. She said, I'm really sick, and I have COVID, and you're going to have to do Gladiator tonight. I was like, holy shit. But something in me knew, I don't know what's about to happen, but it's happening, because even if I have to, I'm an improviser, by training and all that. Even if I have to improvise, I have to honor her, and I have to honor Hans, and I don't want to let anyone down, my bandmates. And so I knew within seconds of that email, my phone was going to ring, and it was going to be Hans. I just felt it, and sure enough, my phone rang, and I just answered and I'll never forget this. I don't know what came over me. I answered the phone, and I just said, "Don't worry." We don't have phones like this anymore, by the way. I just aged myself tremendously. I said, like that, "Don't worry." He says, "It's my job to worry." I said, "Don't worry. It's going to be fine." And I said, "It may not be, like awesome yet, but we'll get there." I said, "But it's going to be fine." And then during sound check, we took just, a couple of runs, to try it out. And I don't know. Actually, I don't even know what happened. So I'm glad that I'm glad that something happened, and I just let the spirit and the sound waves guide me, and Hans, of course, came up and started, like, conducting and stuff. It was beautiful. And
It's really
and it
incredible.
was all for Lisa, of course, because my poor friend was, ailing, terribly with COVID. So totally dedicated to her.
It's such an amazing story, and to have that, you mentioned there's almost a camaraderie between the bandmates as well, that it's like one family. And I think I've been lucky, I've seen them live 7 times over.
Oh yeah,
The first one was like
yeah.
2014 now, so
You've been on the you've
yeah,
been seeing the
it's
evolution of it all. Yeah, that's before you probably were there before I even came into the picture.
yeah. I was at the Dune premiere last week, and I brought the first ever ticket from his first. He did 2 concerts back in 2014, and that was his first ever foray into it. And obviously, they were clearly a massive hit. I think they both sold out straight away, and then the tours began. And I think the rebrand with the vinyl in the background, for those that are curious, it is an evolution of a band. And with live music, some bands evolve, but from a soundtrack perspective, so often it's the same. But it's almost like characters. You mentioned Molly Rogers earlier on the later tours. She's been, I mean, as a vocalist, you'll know far more than me, but the Interstellar suites, one of the most hauntingly beautiful voices ever. And I remember the first time that happened, I was like, wait, this Interstellar is different to the other tours.
Yeah,
And it was
yeah,
her singing it, and it's like a pin drop, that the entire room was just silent. And
no,
it must be an incredible feeling to tour with those. And kind of with that too, at the time of us recording this, they've just announced that you guys will be doing another show in Dubai. And it kind of is the perfect place of Dune to ask, how was it performing out in the desert? No doubt doing Dune, the sort of the desert film, it felt like the perfect opportunity. But how was that to perform at compared to some of, I guess, the indoor arenas and whatnot?
Well, we were when we were in Dubai. It was an indoor arena. It was a Coca-Cola arena. So, but we were certainly immersed in the. We could smell the sand somehow, and feel the spice. Yeah, I definitely. It was an arena, so we weren't the live show wasn't outdoors.
Okay.
Yeah, but we certainly experienced Dubai. Yeah.
Amazing. And kind of with that, talking a bit more on the tour as well, I obviously can't ask questions about moving forward. I mentioned I've been lucky in the past with seeing Hans, even Interstellar live, when they've performed an entire score to the screen in the background. Have you ever had the opportunity to do something like that, or if the chance ever came for a film such as Dune, if there ever was put on a cinema where they wanted you to perform live, has that ever been something you've thought of?
To be on the camera, you mean? Like, can you repeat
Like,
the question?
yeah, of course. So
Yeah.
when they did Interstellar live a couple of years ago, so they had the orchestra at the Albert Hall, including Hans performing live, and then they just put the film on a
Oh,
giant screen with no soundtrack.
I
If the
see.
opportunity came to do a film such as Dune or Raya, because it's become quite a thing now, where it's almost like the concerts of a film with the film playing. Is that something that has ever been spoken about, or something you love to do if the chance came?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to new experiences, and I wouldn't, I don't, say no easily. So, and especially if Hans is curating it or involved with it, and I would certainly, I would. Well, we kind of. Do you mean like that they screen the movie from beginning to end, kind of thing, or they do like clips and shit?
Yeah, they
Oh,
screen
yeah,
the
I
entire
haven't done
film
that.
and then
So I was thinking of the
everyone
world.
performs.
Yeah, because in the world of Hans Zimmer, um, they have they show some clips of the movies, and I had done one of the World of Hans Zimmer tours a couple of years ago. But yeah, yeah, that would be interesting. Why not? Yeah.
And like I said, with part two coming out next week as well, almost everyone's back together. Obviously, there's Denis has spoke potentially about Messiah down the line, long term, and for those that read the book, that can't happen straight away. There is a bit of a time gap, but it's kind of gone through all the questions I have with you at the moment, Loire. What I kind of want to pinpoint is everyone's check out your website. You sent me a link to it, loirecotler.com. There's a link in the description. With your music and with your approach, I've just got to say, and I'm not saying 'cause you're on a stream, when I put the headphones on and was listening to it, there are demos on the website of your vocal work. For the people at home who might not be aware, what can they expect from the website? There's like a new section too, if you want to sort of plug that as well as your other work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, by all means, if people want to reach out and get in touch, ask questions, you can connect with me through my website is a kind of a more immersive digital portal these days, that I have been working creatively with a team actually in the UK, George. Their name Against Time and Rosie Lee. We work to kind of create a little bit more of an immersive. If you see all the symbols and syllables, they're like little bird formations and particles and waves, and you can move your finger and they move with you. And I don't know if you've explored that yet, but it's kind of cool. And it's not kind of cool, it's super cool. And what they did. And the whole idea is because I don't actually do social media, so I'm not on there. So I always, I mean, there might be stuff out there, and you could certainly, find stuff like that on the internet. But I wanted to have a place where people could connect with me in a more direct way and intimate way, and ask me questions. And yeah, and there'll be regular updates on there, of events, music that's happening. There'll be a blog at some point. Slowly getting it together, but hopefully that'll be a nice landing place for people to get a sense of the different projects that I'm involved with, and also, maybe some of the raw sounds of the voice that are being used in the films, but you may not recognize it in their raw, form, because maybe we've done some interesting effects to them, or maybe they're layered a lot. But usually I start out in a very analog way, and I always want to express and share with everyone, what does that sound like? What is the most basic vocal lines that might have happened before it became like a massive element of many voices or big orchestrations. And so, yeah. So anyway, there's definitely going to be a lot of samples that will be integrated into that site.
Incredible. And that's to everybody, please check that out in the link, of course. I believe the soundtrack is actually out today for when this video goes up, a week before the film is out. So if you want to listen to it early, which for me personally, I've got to see the film before I listen to the score. But it is there for those that do want to listen to it early, which of course features your voice and so many of the amazing other performances we spoke about today. And I want to say personally, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me today to talk, not just Dune and X-Men, but your career and performing live as well. It's been an absolute privilege. So thank you so much for doing that too.
Thank you, George. So sweet, and just a great opportunity to talk about our shared passion.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And
Yes.
to everybody watching at home, thank you all for watching. There's a lot more Dune stuff happening on the channel. There's a spoiler-free review for part 2. There's a deep dive on part 1. A spoiler discussion will follow the release alongside a review of the 1980s Dune. So thank you all for watching, for commenting, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.